When a 20th century listener hears the word concerto, he is apt to expect passages like this. That is, the concerto, as we understand it, is principally a display piece for the soloist. The orchestra is relegated largely to the role of accompaniment. When a 17th or 18th century listener heard the word concerto, he would associate it with what was known as a concerto grosso, and he would expect an entirely different kind of composition. For example, that is a passage from Bach's first Brandenburg concerto. All 6 of Bach's Brandenburg concertos represent perhaps the highest pinnacle of the concerto grosso form and style. The Italian term concerto grosso itself gives the cue to its essential style. Concertare means to battle side by side, and grosso means large. A large group of instruments, known as the ripieno, was pitted musically against a smaller group of instruments known as the concertino. This opposition provided a continuous contrast between loud and soft, between group and solo. The concertino could be any group of solo instruments. It was rarely a single instrument as we think of a concerto. The ripieno, on the other hand, was in most instances a string orchestra, occasionally reinforced by winds and brass. A concerto grosso usually had 3 movements, alternating fast, slow, and fast. One aspect of the larger body of instruments, the ripieno, is very important to bear in mind. That is, its bass. Practically without exception, the bass line of a Baroque composition was played not only by the cellos and basses, but also by a keyboard instrument, usually the harpsichord. The harpsichordist would play the bass line with his left hand, and with his right hand he filled in the harmony. For instance, here is a passage from Bach's First Brandenburg Concerto, as it was written for the bass line and 2 solo violins. Now listen to the way those measures actually would sound in performance. Notice how the harpsichord binds the 3 lines together by filling in the harmony. That was the practice of the time. Such a bass line was known as the basso continuo, and the filling in of the harmonies by the harpsichordist was known as realizing the bass. However, the composer rarely wrote out the harpsichord part. He left this so-called realization to the harpsichord player himself, who was supposed to improvise it. The ingenuity and invention of the harpsichordist was in a large part responsible for the success of any particular work. Incidentally, there is a distinct similarity between the type of improvisation necessary for the 17th century harpsichordist when he realized the bass, and that of the 20th century jazz pianist. The latter sees only a skeleton harmonic scheme on the printed page, such as this. And out of it creates an elaborate piano part like this. Another essential aspect of the concerto grosso style was the consistent use of highly polyphonic writing. That is, writing for more than one voice. Listen to a typical sound of a Baroque orchestral work. In that passage from Bach's First Brandenburg Concerto, there were actually 9 independent voices, each one pursuing its own course. This obviously is an entirely different concept from the homophonic or one-voice writing of the classical period. For example, compare what you have just heard with the following typical passage of a Mozart concerto, where we hear a single voice melody with just chords in the accompaniment. A further characteristic of concerto grosso form, and particularly applicable to the Brandenburg concertos, is the use of the so-called ritornello in the fast movements. The word ritornello means return. A fast movement would usually open with a passage for the full orchestra which would present the main musical material. That passage would be repeated at various important points throughout the movement. The continuous returning to the opening passage gave it the name ritornello, return. The successive appearances of the ritornello act as pillars in the grand structure of the movement and serve for the listener as musical guideposts. Let us see now how those four elements can be identified in the first Brandenburg concerto. The concertino, that is, the solo instruments, in this instance, consists of 3 oboes, 2 horns, and 1 solo violin. Opposed to them, the full supporting orchestra, the ripieno, consists of the usual string orchestra. Its bass line, the basso continuo, is supported not only by a harpsichord, but also by a bassoon. The first movement opens with a ritornello. That ritornello appears in its entirety 4 times during the course of the movement. These 4 appearances of the ritornello act as pillars in the structure of the movement. They are all loud. Between them appear the soft concertino passages in which the horns, the oboes, and a few strings come in as solo groups, not as individual solo instruments. They play one or another of the individual musical elements of the ritornello and elaborate upon them. For instance, directly after the first ritornello, the horns play one of its elements. While the oboes play another. And the solo strings provide a light support. Together, they sound like this. Sometimes the solo groups are used independently, the strings alone, the oboes, and the horns. You may notice, in listening to the performance record, that these solo passages are not prolonged. They are often interrupted by just a single measure or a few measures played by the full orchestra. There are, however, 2 prolonged solo passages, one before the third and another before the last appearance of the ritornello. The music of both those prolonged solo passages makes exciting use of the brilliant upper register of the horns. This is the passage just before the end. Listen to the virtuoso use of the horns. This is the last appearance of the ritornello. The second movement of this concerto, a slow movement, has been described by Sir Donald Tovey as the most impassioned song of woe ever written. It is certainly highly emotional music, and should counteract the notion among some listeners that Baroque music was highly polished and beautifully organized, but essentially cold. The expressive song starts in the oboe, with an almost monotonous accompaniment in the strings. The melody is repeated by the solo violin. Then by the basses. The entire second movement is constructed on that one melodic figure. The movement closes with the final appearance of that melody in the bass. Now a soulful cadenza by the oboe. And a mysterious close. These soft, sad chords are interrupted by a joyful outburst, the opening of the third movement. The third movement, like the first, is in true concerto grosso form, characterized immediately by the ritornello. Here is the opening ritornello in its entirety. It is fascinating to notice how Bach, out of mere fragments of the ritornello, proceeds to construct whole sections for the solo instruments. For example, at one point, the solo violin exploits the first element. It is relieved by the accompanying orchestra repeating the same element. Immediately after that, the oboe and violin exploit another element of the ritornello. Starting where we left off before, we hear this clever dialogue. Now the horn and violin make a dialogue out of still another element. In interrupted shortly by an orchestral reference to the opening. Towards the end of the movement comes a dramatic surprise, a sudden pause, and then an exaggerated slowing of the tempo. The balance is almost brutally readjusted, however, with the final appearance of the violin playing the theme. Recall that the concerto grosso usually had 3 movements: fast, slow, fast. In this first Brandenburg concerto, Bach appends a minuet as a 4th movement. Why did he do it? Spitta, the famous Bach authority, remarks that this minuet has no formal connection whatever with the first 3 movements, which are complete without it. That may well be, but my feeling is that the minuet has an important aesthetic purpose. It is needed to provide a relaxed close to the whole concerto, which was missing from the exciting but slightly abrupt close of the 3rd movement. Compare that aesthetically with the sense of completion provided by the final grand bow of the minuet. In discussing the first Brandenburg concerto, I have purposely emphasized the structure which is characteristic of all concerti grossi. A more interesting feature, however, of the second Brandenburg concerto is its instrumentation. The concertino, the solo instruments, consists of trumpet, flute, oboe, and violin. The ripieno is the usual string orchestra with the harpsichord supporting the bass. The instrument to be particularly noted here is the so-called Bach trumpet. The trumpeters of Bach's time were highly respected musicians. Every noble of any consequence had 3 or 4 highly accomplished trumpeters in his retinue, who traveled with him everywhere. In most cities of any size, there was a very exclusive guild of trumpeters. The trumpets of Bach's time had no valve, and all the different tones had to be produced exclusively by the lips. The tighter the player compressed his lips, the higher the overtone or harmonic he could produce. These are the notes which can be played by a trumpeter using his lips alone. Notice that the very high overtones are closer together, and only in these high regions can the trumpet play a complete scale. And therefore a complete melody. To produce these high tones requires tremendous muscular control, and the highly skilled trumpeters of the guilds specialized in them alone. Most of Bach's trumpet parts are very difficult, since they were written exclusively for those high tones. Gottfried Reiche, who was Bach's favorite trumpeter in Leipzig, died the day after he had played the composer's Cantata number 214, which contains this typical trumpet part. His death was attributed to overexertion. When the guilds disintegrated in the social upheaval of the 18th century, the art of high trumpet playing died out, and the typical trumpet parts of the classical period, with which we are more familiar, made use only of the lower and middle ranges of the instrument. Recently, strangely enough, the art of playing the high tones of the trumpet is coming back into its own with jazz musicians. Musically, the entire first movement of the Second Brandenburg Concerto is based on the opening measures of its ritornello. At that point, the solo instruments come in, one by one, with short appearances of the full orchestra in between each entrance, like a musical comma. The solo violin begins. The full orchestra. The oboe joins. Again, the full orchestra. The flute joins. The full orchestra. Finally, the trumpet. And now the ritornello is completed. In the second movement, there is a notable change in the instrumentation. By tradition, it should be slow and lyrical, and therefore the bright, silvery tones of the trumpet would be an intrusion. So Bach, with his unerring aesthetic instinct, eliminates that solo instrument altogether, and with it the bulk of the string orchestra, which was needed to support its high tones. He utilizes, in this gentle canzonetta, only the soft flute, the pensive oboe, and the tender solo violin, accompanied by the basso continuo, which, you remember to the 17th century, meant the bass, the cello, and the harpsichord. The result is a pure gem of Baroque chamber music. Musically, the movement is a revelation of how much a master composer can make out of how little. The entire piece is built exclusively on one short motive. And its counter melody. Let us see what a beautiful tapestry Bach can weave out of those two fine threads. Against a constantly moving bass, the movement starts with each of the three solo instruments playing the motive in turn, commencing with the violin. Immediately, the oboe joins, playing the motive, while the violin has the counter melody and the bass continues its march. And now the flute plays the motive, the oboe plays the counter melody, and the violin fills in the harmony. And so the whole movement advances on its perfect way. The final cadence is temporarily interrupted by a surprise harmony. Here is the surprise harmony. But it resolves peacefully. The echoes of that soft chord have barely died away when the trumpet announces the vivacious theme of the last movement. This last irrepressible movement provides a perfect example of the polyphonic character of the concerto grosso style. It is a strict four-voice fugue among the four solo instruments, with slight support from the orchestra. It dances along so gaily that it is easy to overlook the marvel of its construction. After the trumpet, the oboe has a theme. Now the violin. When the flute enters, the trumpet falls out. The three instruments play a short episode, which grows in anticipation until the trumpet re-enters with a joyous theme. And for the first time, the orchestra lends full support. Bringing the first part of the fugue to a close. There is polyphonic writing at its best. Even in his time, when this was the predominant style of composition, Bach was deeply admired by his contemporaries for the mastery demonstrated by such passages. The third Brandenburg concerto is written only for strings, in three individual groups of three violins, 3 violas, and 3 cellos, with a supporting basso continuo. In the comment on the first two concertos, we covered pretty thoroughly the four main characteristics of the concerto grosso. The third Brandenburg concerto gives us an opportunity to pay more attention to one of the outstanding qualities of Bach as a composer, his extraordinary inventiveness. Let's hear the opening ritornello and then see what a great variety of inventions Bach can extract from mere segments of it. There are several independent musical ideas in the ritornello. Take its first phrase, for instance. That in itself can be broken down further to this, and even further to just this. Right after the first ritornello ends, the three individual groups of instruments take that minute figure and pass it around among themselves, down through the entire range of the orchestra. Later on, the same figure goes up as well as down through the groups of instruments. At another point in the movement, the violins pursue an independent musical thought. But the unity of musical fabric is retained by having the three violas accompany that phrase with the basic figure of the ritornello. This is the result. About halfway through the first movement, there occurs the following sequence in which that tiny element achieves dramatic proportions. Those are just a few examples of the way Bach extracts a multitude of musical ideas from one tiny source. There is no second movement in the third Brandenburg Concerto, as it has come down to us. Only these two chords are indicated. You may wonder why. The custom of the time was for the composer to direct the orchestra from the harpsichord. The assumption is that at this point in the third concerto, Bach, who was a master at improvisation, interpolated a slow movement for harpsichord solo, probably making it up as he went along. Since none of us would presume to be as inventive as Bach, we merely play what he indicated. And pass on to the bright last movement, which is a buoyant jig. The jig is in two parts, each of which is repeated. It is another brilliant example of Bach's mastery of polyphonic style. Just listen to how a simple phrase, a scale figure going up and down, can become a mass of complex sound. Bach sends that phrase dancing through the different voices of the orchestra in this order: first violins, second violins, violas, and basses. Now Bach alters it slightly to lead to a new key. There he commences the process over again, this time starting with the first violas, second violas, violins, basses. The altered figure again leads to a new key. On that new tone, Bach establishes a pedal point in the basses, that is, a tone which remains constant. While the voices above it move. The moving voices here utilize a new figure, a broken chord. Notice what a sense of anticipation is built up by this device of a pedal point. Now the bass moves from the pedal point and commences a huge arpeggio, which sweeps up through the entire orchestra to the highest string on the violins. Against this rising arpeggio, Bach superimposes the scale figure in a downward movement of the first violins, from their highest string to their lowest. What an exciting cadence is achieved by this cross motion. That is all there is to the first part of the jig. Listen to it all the way through. The altered figure leads to a new key. Again, we hear the phrase dancing throughout the orchestra. Now we hear the pedal point. And the exciting cross-motion cadence. In the second part of the jig, Bach makes use of both elements of the first part, the scale figure and the broken chord figure, as well as the following new figure played originally by the first violins. When one hears music like this, and like all of these great concertos, one cannot help reacting like Olin Downs when he wrote, "The plenteousness of Bach's inventions, the exuberance of his workmanship, and his own abounding vitality seize you and make your blood dance as his motives dance in the orchestra. He communicates an incomparable feeling of health, logic, and beauty.